nothing like curling up with a good book in the summertime, just relaxing under the trees. Even better if that great book is written by a local author, as is this next one by Tara Mondou, who joins us, the author of Little Girl in the Mirror. And I have to say, congratulations to you, because you and I kind of know each other in a different way. You work with block parents. I mean, I always knew that you were passionate about that. I did not know that you were a writer, an author, Tara.
Yeah, I'm not.
Well, apparently you are. You are.
Absolutely. You're right. I'm not a writer. I've never written anything before in my life. I don't blog. I've never taken a writing course. So yes, this was a labor of love. And I'm as surprised as you are to see this novel sitting here in front of us.
I find it hard to believe that you don't write, because when I read through your book, and congratulations on Little Girl in the Mirror, so beautifully written, so well written, based on a true story of your mother.
Yeah.
And there were times reading through it, I had to sort of stop and remind myself, okay, this isn't just great fiction. This is a true story.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my mom passed away 6 years ago now, and 4 years before that, my grandmother passed away. So they were both living in Stratford most of their lives, and then we moved to Kitchener. I was born and raised in Kitchener. And so as a young child, they would always be telling me stories, and my great-grandmother as well, who's also in the book, stories about their childhood, whether it was my grandma's childhood or my mom's childhood, or stories about Cape Breton and how the men in their family worked in the mines and how some of them got killed. And so they just have all these amazing stories, and my mom always had amazing stories too growing up. And I used to always say to her, you need to write this down. You should write a book or write your memoirs. So in the end, when they both passed away, I ended up getting all the photos and the journals and the diaries. And I thought, well, you know, I really should try to gather all this information and at least write it down to document it. So my husband and I have 2 daughters. So I thought, what better way for them to understand their grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother than to read it actually in a book. So I had lots of different friends and people who were supporting me. And they said, well, why don't you actually make a book out of this? Because it actually is quite a good story. And that's what happened.
You know, it's one thing to decide that you're going to write a book. But I think for me, it's an amazing responsibility to then take your mother's memories and put them into a book. Did you feel that sort of sense of responsibility that I've got to get this right, I've got to get it exactly right?
Yes, it was tricky. And I didn't know if I was going to write more of a fiction book or a memoir book or a biography book. And because I didn't understand how to write a book, I just simply wrote down the story. So let's just say out of all of the pictures in the journals, there may have been 10 what I thought were great stories. So I really just wrote the stories out. And then, you know, I really, like, whether it's divine intervention or just my mom, like, over my shoulder, it was really weird. I could actually sit down. I really put my life on hold. I gave myself 10 weeks to write it. I told myself it's got to be this long, this many words, this is how many hours per day. I was quite disciplined. And I literally was able to write sometimes 1,500 to 3,000 words per day. And it was tricky, but I just realized that, you know, it's their truth. So if my mom said this happened to her, whether it really happened, whether it happened the way she thought it did, whether I used to always say she was exaggerating, but that was her truth. That's what she thought happened to her. So who was I to say, well, that probably didn't really happen? So I decided that this is her truth, and I gave myself permission then to be able to write it the way I thought. Certainly had to fill in some gaps. But I just wrote it the way that I thought that she would have told me that story.
Yeah, and this was a pretty tough truth in a lot of places, in a lot of ways, to have to put down to paper stories that I'm sure that you heard when you were younger, and then maybe didn't quite understand at the time. But in writing the book, did it give you a better understanding of your mom?
Oh, absolutely. I think the idea that when you're a child, whatever happens to you is going to affect you your whole life. So you can go to counseling, or you can think, well, I'm all grown up now, I'm over it. But I think you don't really get over some things. And I think some people carry that stuff with them and have a hard time with relationships maybe going forward. So I think, I think it's therapeutic. I think for me, it gave me a better understanding of her. I wish she could have written it. But yeah, and I think it helps my girls get to know their grandmother. So I think it's a lot of, it's quite therapeutic, and it's a lot of understanding happening while writing it and while reading it at the same time.
Yeah, you mentioned that your mom grew up in Cape Breton. She was young. She was in Cape Breton. She was raised for the first 5 years primarily by her grandparents.
Yes.
Your great-grandparents. And then one day her mom comes and says she's going to bring her back to Ontario, which brings her back here. And that sort of begins this difficult journey that she goes on of being kind of from these two worlds, these two very different worlds and what happens. And your mom is that little girl in the mirror that you reference, that little girl that she looks at that sort of gets her through everything.
I think that the thing to understand is she was born in 1950, so her mother was an Irish Catholic single mother who, you know, she was the firstborn, so of 10 children, her parents certainly thought when she left Cape Breton to go to Brantford to work for the war effort that she was going to be the shining star of the family. And I think what happened is that shooting star sort of fell, and I think she had a very hard time. It was very hard. There wasn't social services in those days. You were somewhat shunned. It wasn't easy to get a job. It wasn't easy to find care for your child. So she did have to give her baby back up to her mother and left her in Cape Breton for 5 years, and then came back when she thought she would be able to better take care of her at 5 years old.
At the end of the book, you talk about finding pictures of your great-grandmother, your grandmother, and your mother, and there was something about it that you noticed something common and couldn't quite put your finger on it, and eventually it came down to one word, strength. And that's sort of what you took from that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we all need strength, right? So everything that you're going through, whether you're you know, my great-grandmother didn't go to school, she didn't have a lot of education, they didn't have a lot of money, so they had to be strong to keep their children fed and housed. I mean, my grandma had to keep strong to be able to keep working and to keep having an income. And then as mothers, we all have to be strong to help raise our children properly. So.
Well, the book is A Little Girl in the Mirror. If you can find it in a bookstore, because it's been selling out already, certainly locally you can find it, or you can go to Tara's website too and order it there and find it out there.
Yeah.
And find out what else you've got coming up, because I understand there's more books. So we'll find out about that, and we'll have you on again when you get number 2 done. Congratulations,
Thank you so much.
Tara, on your book. More daytime still to come. Stay with us.